This is the Franchise QB Podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs to win big in franchising. We huddle up weekly to educate our audience about the most successful small business model ever created, franchising.
Welcome to the Franchise QB Coaches Corner. This is where we highlight franchise coaches, the unsung heroes of the franchising space. They go by coaches, consultants, and brokers, and they play a vital role in the franchising ecosystem. Similar to buy-side real estate agents, franchise coaches guide entrepreneurs through the overwhelming landscape of thousands of franchise opportunities. They assist with everything from franchise search guidance to FDD interpretation to funding strategy to recommending franchise attorney for legal reviews and much, much more. And most of them offer 100% free services to the franchise buyer and will coach them step by step through the due diligence process. They assist with both franchise startups and resale acquisitions. Let's meet a franchise coach and learn how they are changing lives through franchise ownership. Joining us today in Coach's Corner is Kevin Laleman, owner of Franchise Opportunity Advisors and certified franchise consultant with FranServe. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely. Good to see you again. So you were a franchise owner with AmeriSpec Inspection Services for 26 years and exited last year. That's a tremendously long run with one franchise. Can you take us back to the 90s and kind of tell us how you got involved with AmeriSpec?
Sure. My wife and I at the time were living in Indiana, and we were interested in moving back to Minnesota, where our families were. We were having a kid at the time, so we figured it was a good time to do that. And we started looking at different business opportunities. And I remembered when we bought our house in Indiana, how I went through the process with the home inspector and was really intrigued by it and thought, with my construction background from when I was in high school and college, that that's something I could do. And I started talking to the owner there, and then it snowballed, and I started looking at different business opportunities in the inspection field, and I came across AmeriSpec. And, we ended up going from Indianapolis up to Chicago, kind of their meet and greet type thing with potential franchise owners.
Okay.
And really, fell in love with the brand and fell in love with the idea of franchising and, having a partner in my business quest to basically somebody to guide me along the way, because I've never owned a home inspection business before. I've never, I've owned businesses before, but not in that area. So finding somebody that had the playbook that I could follow and become successful. And one thing led to another, and we were fortunate enough to sell our business in Indiana, moved back to Minnesota, and started with AmeriSpec at that time.
Very cool. So you mentioned a background in construction. What kind of things were you doing back in high school and college in the construction field? Was it just like weekend kind of projects, or was it like your employment, or what did that look like back then?
Well, when I was in high school, it was primarily summers where I would work for a contractor, and we would build everything from houses to remodeling to pig barns and pole barns for machinery, anything, it was in the farming community. So,
Okay.
We had a wide variety. So I got to see a lot of different things. The contractor that I worked for actually started pouring his own cement walls at that time, rather than block was primarily the basement foundation type that we were using. And he started pouring them, and he started using wood foundation. So got a lot of different variety in that.
Yeah, that's really cool that you were able to take that kind of skill set you had in construction and turn it into a business. And so how did you discover franchising? I mean, obviously you could have started your own independent business that provided those home inspection services, but you chose to join AmeriSpec. How did that come to be? I mean, was it like a convention that came to town, or was it through someone that mentioned franchising? I mean, how did that actually originate?
Well, I was looking for an inspection business after I had talked to and looked at the business model with the gentleman that did my inspection. And then as I started doing research, I started finding different franchises. And,
Okay.
like I said, I've kind of fell in love with the idea of having somebody for a support system there, rather than just going out and reinventing the wheel on my own.
Yeah.
Somebody that has done it before. And, I'm not risk adverse because I have owned other businesses before, but just wanted something that, I could, like I said, I could follow a game plan.
So Kevin, it's really interesting that you had your AmeriSpec franchise for 26 years. I mean, that is a really long run. I'm sure there's tons of stories in there, ups and downs of business ownership. But you mentioned you exited from that business last year in 2023. How did you find the buyer that took over the business when you left?
Well, I just kind of put some feelers out and was trying to decide if I could put it on the market, and started doing some research and found it would be easy to sell it through a broker. But ultimately, I decided I had a couple people on my staff that worked for me that were doing a great job, and I could see them wanting or being able to be an owner. So I approached one of them, and he right away said, yeah, he was very interested. He was wondering, he said, not that I was old at the time, but eventually I would want an exit strategy. And one thing led to the next, and we worked on it probably for about a year, from the time that I approached him originally to the time that he actually purchased my business. But I could see him as a good candidate because of his experience in the inspection industry. He had been with me for about 10 years, and I just thought he had the right demeanor and he had the right personality where he could be successful with the business.
Yeah, that's awesome that it was someone that worked for you for 10 years. I mean, that's a lot of longevity, and it sounds like a great transfer of ownership in that situation. So then you decided that after you exited AmeriSpec, you were going to become a franchise coach and assist others in pursuing entrepreneurship. Did you kind of have that inclination as you were going through kind of unwinding your business? When did it kind of strike you that, hey, I can help other people get into business ownership?
Actually, it started before I thought about selling my business. I had been called by another FranServe coach, and he basically was telling me about a couple of businesses that I had inquired about, because I guess I'd be kind of called a serial entrepreneur, but always looking for the next opportunity. And I got a call from Rich Weintraub, a FranServe consultant, and he was telling me about the different franchises that I inquired about. And he said, well, which ones sound most interesting to you? And I said, what I'm most interested in is what you're doing. And he said, oh,
really cool. So you started off looking for a business, and then yes, it ended up turning into, hey, I want to help other people on their journey to explore, franchise ownership.
Exactly. For years I had coached my kids in different sports and stuff, and being a business owner, coaching and teaching my employees how not only to do inspections, but how to, handle themselves properly on the inspection, not only with the client, but with the realtor, et cetera. Making presentations to different realtor groups. I became more comfortable, talking with people about my business, and just with my experience in the past from owning a business, and learning about franchising, and learning about, I was on the national franchise board for AmeriSpec for several years, and getting to work with a franchisor and understanding their side of it. I thought I could be helpful to a prospective new franchise owner to basically explore that and see not only if it was for them, but help them find an opportunity that would work best for them.
Yeah, and it's kind of neat that you have direct experience, like building those really strong referral relationships for AmeriSpec in the community, because a lot of candidates exploring ownership are like, all right, how do I staff it, and how do I find customers? And the client acquisition piece usually revolves around some type of digital marketing footprint, but it's complemented with some great referral relationships. And you can kind of educate people about it because you've done it yourself, which is cool. So that kind of leads me into my next question. How has your past experience in business translated into your role as a franchise coach to help those that are new to franchising?
Well, I think it's one thing that I've been there. I've been in those footsteps of somebody trying to look at the opportunity of buying a business or acquiring a business, starting a business. and can kind of empathize, sympathize with them, understand that it's very stressful. You always have insecurities about yourself and what you're doing and possibility of failure. Mm-hmm. And that's why I always tell them that as a franchisee, you have got the franchisor to help you. And there's a greater history of successful franchises than single owner operators, just from the fact, again, that you have a playbook, you have support, you have all the tools necessary to be successful. And then it's up to you to implement that. And but my past experience, I can, say that I was able to do it with little or no knowledge in the inspection industry because of the franchisor.
Yeah, and I think to your point of the franchise support, there's also that community of other owners. Like when you were at AmeriSpec, did you collaborate with other AmeriSpec owners to kind of figure out best practices and how they're doing it? Because within the system, not everyone operates the same way, right? You get this playbook, but it's up to you to interpret that playbook. So did you find yourself over the years kind of building relationships with others to kind of help your business thrive and to help other people that were kind of new to the system kind of get there quicker?
Yeah, definitely. When you meet with owners, whether it was at a regional or a convention, probably the greatest value we had was just talking to each other afterwards or before the meetings. Basically, like you said, finding out what they're having success with, find out what they're not having success with, what's not working for them. And in some situations, you can see the similarities in your market, and things that are going to work for you. And sometimes things aren't going to work for you because they're a different personality than you are, and they have comfort level doing certain things. But, most of the time, it's a matter of they have had experience or you have had experience in a certain way, and you're able to share those. Because I had people that were in the business for a lot more years than me, and when we were talking, I would just say, well, have you ever tried this? And they'd say, no, I hadn't thought of that. And that's the whole thing. If you bring up a different perspective to different people, somebody's going to have an idea that maybe you hadn't thought of.
Yeah. And that's a common misconception that you have to be an expert in the trade to get into that franchise. And as we both know, one of the value propositions of a franchise is that they're taking decades of their experience and turning it into days or weeks of training for the franchise owner and their team. So you don't have to be an expert in home inspection to become an AmeriSpec owner. So now with your background in construction and with home inspection, do you currently as a coach specialize in certain franchise categories like home services, or do you kind of work across the board in multiple industry categories? Kind of what's your approach when you're working with clients?
Sure. Home services may be my background and obviously my strongest suit, but I've worked with people in all different areas and from all different walks of life. It really depends on what they're looking for. Some people might be interested in home service. Other people may be interested in home health care or restaurants, anything. As long as they have the aptitude, business aptitude, and the willingness, like I say, to follow a game plan, I can help them by asking some, in-depth questions about them and what they're looking for to find the right business for them. Just because it's the right business for me or for you doesn't mean it's going to be the right business for them.
Yeah. And you mentioned that openness or that open mindset when someone's looking at a business. What attributes do you like to see in a candidate, in addition to an open mindset, that gives them an advantage when you're working with them in their search to find the perfect match for them?
Sure. A willingness to, take advice, to follow a game plan, like I said. As you mentioned, you don't have to follow it exactly. And that's what a lot of people fear when getting into franchising, that they're going to be told what to do. No, you're going to be guided. And somebody that can be guided and can be helped, is willing to accept help from the franchisor, from other owners, like you said, to make sure that they can be successful. If they have, you said, an open mind in order to accept those things, a good business background is probably the most essential thing too. If you understand business and if you're capable of learning more as you go, it's going to be the best situation for you.
Yeah, and I think there's another misconception that when you're a franchise owner, it's really strict. And that's not the case. I mean, and obviously there's a whole spectrum of rigidity within different systems depending on how mature they are and the culture. But it's your business as a franchise owner. And there's a lot of stuff you get to do that isn't necessarily what your neighboring franchisee is going to do. So I think that's a good thing for a candidate to really educate themselves on when they're looking at different brands, because some are a lot more flexible than others. So, going back to those attributes, who then makes a good candidate for you for your franchise search and matching services? Are they people that are looking to get out of corporate America? Are they independent business owners that want to be able to scale and they can't do so with their independent business without the systems? Are there certain people that you really have a lot of success placing? Who makes a good candidate for you, Kevin?
Well, I mean, really all of those, whether it's a corporate refugee or even a young person that's just wanting more for their family. And I would say that's probably what I see more than anything. People that want more for themselves, more for their family. They don't want to be in the 9 to 5 grind for somebody else. Somebody that is willing to take a chance on themselves and better their life and better their family. And that's what, going back to the owner that bought my business, I guarantee that he's going to be better off in the next several years owning that business than he ever was working for me, because he's going to have something to sell again when he's done.
Yeah, I mean, you had a diamond in the rough. It's not often that you come across a business with 25 plus years of longevity, and especially for that particular, employee that became the owner, a deep knowledge of the business model, which is a big advantage. So if someone's coming to you and they're looking for guidance, what is your process when you work with a new candidate to help them even determine if franchising is right for them?
Sure. First of all, I'd like to find out what their motivation is for looking for a business, whether it is just adding extra income, diversifying, or if they want to transition from their current work role to owning their own business. And that's going to tell me a lot as far as what they're going to need as far as a business. Are they going to need something that's semi-involved or total absentee ownership? Or are they looking to be owner-operator? Are they looking to have a company, like you say, that you can scale with many employees? Or are they looking for something more intimate, more, on the small side, where they're going to just be them and a few key employees to grow that business?
Yeah, so the ownership type is a real big consideration in addition to capital and how much time they have to allocate to the business. Makes a lot of sense. So what advice do you have for someone that's considering franchise ownership but is kind of new to the space? What would you say to them?
Well, I mean, I think, finding a trusted consultant or franchise coach in order to help them in the process is key. And, look for somebody that is understanding what you're looking for, is willing to work with you. And then be open-minded to different ideas. You may come in looking for, a certain type of franchise or not even a franchise. And many people we talk to aren't looking for franchises. And once you educate them and teach them a little bit about what franchising is, rather than it's just another, XYZ restaurant, once they understand that it's a support system, then they can go a long ways in learning what their potential is and what really they're looking for.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So let's shift gears a little bit. And can you tell the audience something that's interesting about you outside of your franchising expertise and your coaching career? And tell us a little bit about Kevin.
Sure. Born and raised in Minnesota, lived in Texas, lived in Indiana, lived in Wisconsin. So moved around for different jobs and different businesses quite often. And then avid sports fan, Minnesota sports fan, whether it be professional or college. Obviously with the Twins not doing too well right now. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Not doing too well right now, but there's always hope. I come from a family of 7 kids, so I'm used to youngest of 7. So I'm used to fighting for everything I got along the way, and a family of entrepreneurs. My dad was a farmer. I've got a couple of brothers and sister that are still in the farming community. other brothers that have either managed large businesses or business owners. So, a lot of history in my past as far as ownership and entrepreneurship. So.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, this has been great, Kevin. Anything else that you want to add to the mix today before we wrap up?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to, be on Coach's Corner today. And, if there are people out there looking for a business, there's always the right business for you. It's just a matter of doing the research and having somebody trusted along the way to help you with the process.
That's great advice. Well, I appreciate you joining me, Kevin. And anyone listening wants to contact Kevin about becoming a franchise owner, you can reach him at kevin@franchiseopportunityadvisors.com, and I'll have a link here posted, or you can contact me and I'll get you guys connected. Thank you so much, Kevin, for taking the time to discuss Franchise Opportunity Advisors and franchising with us today.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Franchise QB podcast, where you're at the helm of your future as a franchise owner. If you enjoyed the content, please rate the show and recommend it to anyone that might be interested in franchising. Make sure to visit franchiseqb.com to subscribe to my newsletter and for an actionable playbook to go from walk-on to legend in your new business. Follow us on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB and join us every week for a new episode. See you next time.
Visit franchiseqb.com to take the next step of your journey towards wealth, independence, and franchise ownership. And remember, when working for the man gets old, you must do something bold. Thank you for listening.